Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. Georgia's president, Mikhail Saakashvili, held his first face-to-face talks with the victorious rival Bidzina Ivanishvili since the ruling party's shock defeat in parliamentary elections last week. On Monday, Ivanishvili named his first cabinet, nominating a mixture of figures from the two previous governments as well as some with no experience of holding office. But Mr. Saakashvili remains president for another year before the government switches to a parliamentary system. Will there be a smooth transition? Will it look further west towards the European Union and NATO? Or will it seek better relationship with Moscow? Joining me to discuss this is Ziba Norman, director and founder of the Transatlantic and Caucasus Studies Institute. Also here in the studio is Ben Judah, policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, and Dr. Anna Matveeva, visiting senior research fellow in the Department of War Studies at King's College London. And on the line we have Nick Clayton, senior editor at the Tbilisi-based TV station Canal PIK. Ziba Norman, what's your assessment of Saakashvili's presidency?
Well, I think it's extraordinary, actually, that he's lasted as long as 9 years, and that actually tells you a lot about the composition and, in some sense, the lack of talent in the Georgian pool. So I think there was a time just after the war in 2008 when it looked as if he wasn't going to be able to hold on to power, and he did. So he was a very important unifying force for Georgia. What's more important, and I think what will make up his legacy and ultimately the success of Georgia as a nation, if it can remain as a strong nation, is going to be how well he deals with becoming the elder statesman, with altering his role, with altering his position. Inevitably, because of constitutional provisions, he's not going to be able to remain. So some of this, I'm afraid, is going to come down to personalities.
I guess the expectation was that when Ivanishvili won the election, that Saakashvili wouldn't go quietly. Has it surprised you that he actually went on television and said, yes, I lost the election?
Not really. I think he realised, he's a very strong fighter, but you have to realise that he also has to be a pragmatist. If he didn't have some element of the pragmatist in him, he wouldn't be there to this date. So I think we have to have a little bit more faith in what he might be capable of. And I think the idea now is to sort of have a cautious but optimistic approach. We have to look very carefully at the cabinet appointments. What has he done on that, even in the last 24 hours? And I think they're telling. I think we've got two cabinet appointments that look to be, quite standard, straightforward, aren't going to ruffle too many feathers. And then we have two other cabinet appointments that I'm a little bit less, I'm a little more concerned about in terms of his judgment, Ivanishvili's judgment, and how that will work in terms of the relationship with Saakashvili.
In terms of the cabinet appointments, Anna Matveeva, Ivanishvili has appointed a mixture of experience from two previous administrations, but also people with no experience at all. So can Georgians have any confidence that this is going to be an effective cabinet?
The same argument was applied to Saakashvili initially when he formed the government. And they were, apart from himself and a couple of other heavyweights like Zurab Shvania and Nina Bojanadze, they were really people who were first unknown. Secondly, some of them very young. One of the defense ministers was 28-year-old. And thirdly, many of them were educated abroad. They were not maybe integrated into Georgia's governing machine. So quite a lot of the same arguments have been raised. But what has worked was that they offered a different approach. And the country needed change. And by and large, that worked. Now we are also looking at another stage of Georgia's development when the country needs change again, and maybe different type of people with different type of experience and expertise are needed for that. There are two appointments which, for instance, I am very heartened. There is Minister for Integration, Parta Zakarishvili, who is a prominent human rights defender, who has real respect and standing among the Abkhaz and South Ossetians. There is Gurama Disharia. So there are some people there who have genuine political and also, I think, moral credentials.
But with reference to the Minister for Integration, who you've just mentioned, he did actually say that if the will among the people of Abkhazia and South Ossetia was to stay independent, then he would support that. That would be problematic, wouldn't it be, for the Georgian government?
That would be problematic, but on the other hand, he just said what is the status quo. He acknowledged the situation which is de facto now, and maybe it is not possible to change it right now. Maybe it's possible to change it within different political circumstances. What is important, that he can maintain a genuine dialogue with Abkhaz and South Ossetians. And that's already improvement on what the policies under Saakashvili have been.
Nick Clayton, the names of the appointments yesterday of the cabinet, what did you make of them? I mean, we've got a former AC Milan footballer who has no political experience also in the cabinet. What are Georgians making of this, and is there any confidence among Georgians that this cabinet can govern properly?
Well, I think the reaction has been overall mixed. I think it wasn't as surprising as I think many UNM supporters were fearing that it was going to be a real turn back to the Shevardnadze regime. There are two ministers that are from Shevardnadze's time, but they're in both the ministries of agriculture and healthcare, which are also issues that Saakashvili's administration has been heavily criticized over in terms of its running of them. So I don't think that's going to scare anyone. The Caucasus is a curious pick, but this has been a story going for a long time, the strange marriage between Caucasus and Ivanishvili. I mean, he was on the top of the party list, and I think everyone more or less expected him to get a high post. But other than that, the only other problematic one that has been largely discussed is Maya Pandikidze, who will be the new foreign minister. And even then, I mean, she was an ambassador to the Netherlands. What many are worried about is the fact that she is also the sister-in-law of Irakli Alessania, who's been nominated as the defense minister and deputy prime minister as well. And so there's some worries about nepotism there. But overall, I don't think there's any real strong cause for worry. The newest face is Irakli Garibashvili, who is a Ivanishvili loyalist, and so he's a bit of a question mark. But I think the Georgia Dream coalition overall, in terms of how they will govern, there's a lot of question marks there. They're all saying the right things. I think they're very well advised by a series of Western advisors. And the real test is once they are actually in government and how they are governing.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Brendan Cole. We're discussing Georgia and the election aftermath with Ziba Norman, Ben Judah, Anna Matveeva and Nick Clayton. There is some lack of experience, but it's probably not surprising, though, is it, given that here we have a man who wins the election who a year ago nobody even knew what he looked like. He has no experience. We can't have that much confidence in him, can we?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I mean, of course, he's a successful businessman, but certainly unprepared for a role very much in the public eye. And that's something I think he readily admits, that he's not good at speaking with journalists, and he's not particularly good in front of the camera. He's gotten better at it. But I do think that from a governance perspective, this whole group is largely untested. The one name that is very popular in Washington is Irakli Alessania. He's well respected in the U.S. As having been both a negotiator with Abkhazia and South Ossetia before, but also having been the Georgia's ambassador to the UN, and he's made a lot of friends there and has a lot of respect. However, he doesn't have much real popular support in Georgia, and although he's been floated as his name, maybe he's going to be the next guy, the next one to step up.
Ziba Norman, Ivanishvili, who's won the election, has said that he will only stay in the job for 2 years, after which he will let more professional politicians take the reins. It's hardly something to instill confidence, is it?
I think actually that is probably the most worrying thing about his election, the election of his movement. We don't really quite entirely understand why he has chosen to put himself up for this. So I think, again, cautious optimism. Maybe he will grow into the role. Maybe he will decide what he's trying to achieve. Maybe there is going to be a sort of vacuum there and it could be filled with anything. But unfortunately, it really is too early to say. And whether or not Alessania might step up to the plate after that, we don't know.
Ben Judah from the European Council on Foreign Relations, I suppose it was clear under Saakashvili that he had a vision of Georgia becoming more Western-leaning, looking towards the European Union, looking towards NATO. Do you see that changing?
Well, in Brussels and in Moscow, there's a lot of surprise at the emergence in Tbilisi of the Prime Minister Enigma. And people in the Kremlin, in the Russian Foreign Ministry, implicitly read the Georgian political situation with Saakashvili being a sort of pro-Western Putin who couldn't lose an election, and understood that Ivanishvili, of course, must be Khodorkovsky. And sooner or later he would be arrested and the West would understand the brutal, firm hand that he really was. What Ivanishvili's people have said is that in the weeks running up to the election, very senior officials from the Russian Foreign Ministry were starting to speak to them at the fringes of conferences going, "What, you're not actually going to win, are you?" So there's a lot of surprise in Moscow. In Brussels, there's muted enthusiasm for what's only the beginning, and in some ways a faltering beginning, of what will be a very long transition, and a sort of deflated sadness that the era of the coloured revolutions is now over. In Kyrgyzstan, in Ukraine, and now in Georgia, all of these leaders that came to power with a lot of enthusiasm behind them, vowing to kind of sail towards Brussels in a regatta, have been replaced by people of varying colours who seem to Brussels a little bit like neo-Titoists.
And maybe something quiet and stable, and a quiet, stable man might suit Georgia and its European aspirations, perhaps.
Well, seen from Brussels, there was this moment in about 2004 in which European leaders sat around reading books called How Europe Will Run the 21st Century. And they believed that this could happen because countries like Ukraine and Georgia were just going to gravitate to Brussels because Europe was the dominant trade partner. And there was this vision that the coloured revolutions were the beginning of the post-Soviet countries, excluding Russia, which the EU had rebranded the common neighbourhood, beginning to go through the whole process that Central Europe had come towards becoming part of the kind of greater Eurosphere. And there's been a lot of worry and surprise as those regimes failed, turned out not to be what they said on the tin, and have started all saying that they want to continue their EU and NATO aspirations, whilst running off to Moscow and signing agreements with the customs union or signing agreements with the Moscow Free Trade Area. Georgia always had a lot of real enthusiasts, kind of crusaders that saw something of kind of 1989 in Saakashvili's eyes, even though the EU will continue to be kind of enthusiastic about signing deals and keeping all the agreements on track that already exist. No one's really going to be that enthusiastic about Ivanishvili.
Anna Matveeva, what about Russia and Moscow? Ben's raised the idea of Brussels' relationship with Georgia, but I mean, how will this change relationships between Russia and Georgia, which have been pretty fraught?
In a way, everything bad which could have happened between Russia and Georgia has already happened. There were two conflicts at the beginning of 90s. Then there was another fully fledged war. Russia and Georgia are the only countries in the former Soviet space which have no diplomatic relations. There has been lots of spy scandals, corruption scandals, all sorts of items over which two countries have fallen out. So we are not looking at another war. We are not looking at more bad things coming. Are we? We can look only at improvement. So whether Ivanishvili is coming to power, and we are still looking at power sharing situation. We are not looking at somebody who has won an outright victory, because the country is also divided, and Saakashvili is there. But there are two things. Ivanishvili is more likely to create a climate which is more conducive to dialogue and serious discussion on how we move forward. Secondly, he took care not to appoint people who are irritants in Moscow eyes. Most of people who are around them would be somebody with whom Moscow would be prepared to sit down and have a normal discussion. So that offers Moscow a chance.
Clayton in Tbilisi. I mean, I guess central to Russia's relationship with Georgia is the Abkhazia and South Ossetia question. Do you see any change in the new administration in Georgia over the Abkhazia and South Ossetia question, the breakaway republics that Moscow has recognized?
There certainly will be some policy shifts in terms of Georgia's outreach to its breakaway territories. The appointment of Pater Saakashvili to the ministry dealing with those issues is, I think, a very good one. And first among them, they've already said that they're likely to change the nomenclature. It's not going to be the Ministry for Reintegration. It'll be something involved with negotiations. They've already talked about reopening this common market that used to exist near the border with South Ossetia. And I do think that the tone is going to change quite to a great extent. Now, how much that tone will really change fundamentally the realities there is yet to be seen. But even under Saakashvili, before the war in 2006, they're in the process of negotiating rail links that would go through Abkhazia, but reopening that, which would be an economic boon for Abkhazia, but also create new ties. There's a lot of these other ideas that I think are going to come out. It's yet to be seen if they actually are going to be adopted as the official policy. I do think there is hope there. But so much bad has happened. I think we can see small incremental increases and improvements, but there's so much bad blood and so much mistrust that it's going to be a long road.
Ben Judah, whatever Ivanishvili says about closer EU integration, that's impossible when you've got the Abkhazia and South Ossetia question.
EU integration is different from NATO integration, in which the EU, there are all kinds of stages you can go for, beginning with economics, then moving on to institutions, then going on to kind of legal and juridical things that you can get done, which takes a long kind of 10-year process in which people will feel tangible benefits and change before membership. And Georgia's been moving towards what's called a DCFTA, which is a sort of major new trading agreement with the EU. And all of that can go ahead. And because EU integration is such a long process, I don't think anyone in Brussels is interested in changing the direction of that. And I don't think Ivanishvili is going to be interested in changing the direction of that, because it will just be institution building and improving the economic climate for a long time before we talk about what bloc Georgia is finally going to be part of or not. With NATO, again, there's all kinds of stuff you can do in terms of improving organisational capacity, improving ties between militaries, before anybody signs on the dotted line as a member of the alliance. Georgia's enthusiasts, there were some of them in London, there were lots of them in Central Europe. I'm not going to be Ivanishvili enthusiast because they're going to suspect him of being a kind of neo-Titoist. He's going to balance between Moscow and Brussels and try and get the best deal out of both, which certainly by his appointments looks like what he's doing.
Ziba Norman, what we have is effectively Saakashvili president for yet another year before this parliamentary democracy takes shape. Can we expect two sworn enemies doing business with each other?
Yeah, I think also it's very important that we as outside observers, particularly the West, actually stand back a little bit and allow it to take shape and also guide in this process, particularly guiding Saakashvili's people. I mean, yes, Georgia has to find its own balance. So I just feel at this stage we have to hope really that Saakashvili is going to be able to grow into a new kind of role. I mean, that's really all we can do, and hope that, as you say, the worst has already happened with Russia. It can only get better from now. Let's just look at this as the next stage for Georgia and not be so ready to try and guide Georgia into any one or other direction, either east or west. Probably there's a chance Georgia will become a member of the CIS again. It's possible. But does that necessarily have to prevent it from being moving towards a journey towards the EU or indeed towards NATO?
It will have far less enthusiastic supporters if it starts to join the free trade area.
Maybe it can find new supporters, you know.
As Armenia did, yeah. Armenia successfully manages both components, and it seemed to be working.
Well, it's about profile, because Armenia's profile in Brussels is next to nothing. People don't talk about it. It's not a major issue. Georgia's a big issue in London, in Washington.
Much of Georgia. I think the West were expecting too much of Georgia far too quickly. So I think the West's expectations have just have got to be somewhat more realistic.
That's very interesting. You said that. It's quite amusing that I think Georgia occupies this psychological space in the Western imagination from the mid-2000s, because as the Arabs were vomiting up the freedom agenda, something that harked back to 1989 happened in Tbilisi, and the Americans kind of latched onto it. I think that Georgians might have to get used to slipping down the agenda now Saakashvili's gone and that romantic moment has gone, and we'll have to get used to being treated as a country on the level of Moldova or Armenia. And I think they're going to struggle to do that.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Brendan Cole. We're discussing Georgia and the aftermath of its election. With me is Ziba Norman, Director and Founder of the Transatlantic and Caucasus Studies Institute, Ben Judah, Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, Dr. Anna Matveeva, Visiting Research Fellow at the Department of War Studies at King's College London, and Nick Clayton, Senior Editor at the Tbilisi-based TV station Canal PIK. Can I turn to Nick Clayton in Tbilisi? I mean, do you see it that way? Do you see Georgia, which was obviously in the headlines, and you had this charismatic leader, Saakashvili, that it's going to be slipping down the pecking order of things?
I think that is possible, and I think the point is well taken that Saakashvili specifically had a lot of enthusiasts in both Washington and Brussels, and he was largely, it was him, this whole government was him personified, and it very much took on his personality, and he was very good at charming individual leaders. However, I think beyond that, I do think this election is going to, no matter how you slice it, is a net positive for Georgia, and it actually does really improve its chances of moving into these alliances. Now, it was always going to be a long time, but I think the fact that we do see a real maturing political culture here, which doesn't exist in any of Georgia's neighbors except for perhaps Turkey, and it doesn't exist in many of other Eastern European countries, that the same kind of enthusiasm and possible growth was going to happen. I do think we're going to see that occur in Georgia because Georgians, especially because they've had such violent trials of democracy in the very early stages of its independence. I mean, Georgians have definitely said they're tired of deciding their politics in the streets, and I think honestly we have yet to see what the Georgian Dream Coalition will do. But I personally hold that I think the best possible outcome would be a Georgian Dream government that either disappoints or it turns out to be not much better than Saakashvili. Saakashvili is very good at playing the opposition and being in the opposition. And perhaps this same government will be out in another 5 years. And at that point, Georgians will have gotten to the point where they can say that, and they can see that there is no messiah that's going to come in and radically change the country. They have to be active and they have to be involved, and they have to have open discussions. And that some of these big issues, especially Abkhazia and South Ossetia, relations with Russia, there will be an actual vibrant discussion going on. And in that environment, I do think it's more possible that Georgia does move ahead on the agenda, albeit in a more low-profile way.
But the Georgian Dream Coalition has made a lot of political capital about lobbing insults at Saakashvili, and I guess trying to hold the government to account. I mean, but their political platform is relatively vague, isn't it? Their policies are relatively vague. We don't really know that much about them.
No, we truly don't. And, I mean, again, they're saying all the right things right now. I mean, they're saying they're going to focus on increasing transparency in the government, going after elite corruption. But all of those statements can be read a number of different ways. On one hand, it's very much sounds like it's from a script of what Westerners want to hear and what their advisors are telling them to say. And also when they talk about going after elite corruption, not that it's not a problem in Georgia, but that is going to be automatically heard by UNM ears, by Saakashvili's loyalists, as a coming witch hunt and as possible recriminations coming, and also by several Georgians, they look at it as possibly it's going to be a situation like Ukraine, where what really happens is that the people in the elite that have their hands on the government contracts and on the government assets, and they're making extreme amounts of money from that, well, the faces are going to change, but the practices will remain the same.
Anna Matveeva, I mean, do you see there could be some kind of witch hunt?
No, I don't think that we are looking into some kind of a campaign of recrimination and massive jailing political opponents. I think that there will be probably some targeted investigations of people who amassed fortunes, but what I think that we are looking into more state intervention in the economy, more support for vulnerable people, more attention to remote and poor parts of the country, more that kind of pro-developmental policies, because Saakashvili benefited young entrepreneurial class, but did not really do that much for kind of poor elder people in rural areas, and that people now would have probably more chance to benefit.
It doesn't say much about a country's democracy if only somebody with that much wealth can actually stand in an election. So for the future, I mean, post Ivanishvili, what do you anticipate happening?
The fact that Ivanishvili is wealthy is neither here nor there. If we look at Berlusconi, if we look at Romney. We find examples around the globe. Yes, we are looking at three types of politicians who can compete. Either it's outright populist, like Alexander Lukashenko, who is totally unpredictable. And then we look at somebody who came from within the system, Dmitry Medvedev, totally predictable, manageable. Yeah. Or we are looking at somebody who would have some kind of independent base to launch a campaign. So in that paradigm, Ivanishvili is quite a logical appointment. One point, if I may, I would think that we should not discount Saakashvili's ability to still come to power if the current government is going to fail spectacularly. It may still be possible that Saakashvili's behavior is now tactically very sound. Let it happen. Let's give them a chance. So then I will come back with kind of real mandate.
Ziba Norman, do you think that do you see that there's a possibility of Saakashvili coming back, and under what kind of circumstances could he come back?
Well, I mean, a lot depends on the economy, which is something that we haven't discussed so far in any real sense today. So I don't know if we have news yet of who the finance minister is going to be. I don't think we've heard too much about the economic programs right now. Finances look all right in Georgia, but that could change very quickly because, I mean, so far Georgian Dream, as they call themselves Dream, have promised an awful lot to a lot of people. Now, are they going to be able to make good on that? And if they do, what effect will that have on the economy? And if so, yes, I mean, what you say is possible. But looking at just the straightforward political dimension, then I would say after 9 years, it's time.
Nick Clayton, I mean, how significant is it that Georgia has had its first election whereby, or the first transfer of power through the ballot box? This is a historic moment, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. It was interesting. I saw my colleague, Thomas DeWall, he wrote, that was very poignant. He said, we're getting better every time. Under Gamsa-Hordia, which was the first independence president, who was ousted in the Civil War, we understood that it was bad to shoot each other. And after Shevardnadze fell to Saakashvili, we learned that, okay, at least we were peaceful this time, but next time we need to do this to the elections. And I do think we're seeing a real evolution of Georgia and the Georgian political consciousness. This is not something that was expected. I mean, in the diplomats that I was speaking to in the weeks, really the days after the election, they said that of all the contingencies that they planned for, whether it be unrest that triggers a Russian intervention or even just prolonged but limited protests, the one thing that they did not plan for in both their security measures and their planned diplomatic response was that 2 days after the election, the government would have already conceded its defeat and we'd be talking about a peaceful deal sharing. And so this is really, really momentous.
But I'd just like to thank my guests, Ziba Norman, Director and Founder of the Transatlantic and Caucasus Studies Institute, Ben Judah, Policy Fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, Dr. Anna Matveeva, Visiting Research Fellow at the Department of War Studies at King's College London, and Nick Clayton, Senior Editor at Tbilisi-based TV station Canal PIK. Thank you very much for joining me on The Voice of Russia.